Hey guys, welcome to another video. This is the first video of the channel after I've officially come up with a name, so welcome officially to Rich G Insights. Happy to have you guys here, happy if you're back. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about sort of interesting, thought experiment that I've been doing with one of my favorite companies and investments and brands, which is Tesla. So basically I've been holding Tesla stock since 2013, and I was debating selling some. My initial investment horizon was 10 years, but of course, like any good investor, I periodically revisit my holdings and examine my portfolio for ways to rebalance it and changes I want to make, and test to see if my thesis is still upheld, especially after the recent run-up in 2020 of Tesla. I decided to revisit that thesis. A lot has changed since 2013 when only the Model S was out and I bought the stock initially. What I wanted to investigate with you guys today is if a better investment for the next 6 years to own a Model 3 and use it as a robotaxi, or to hold the Tesla stock at today's closing price. So let's turn over to the computer screen here. And what you guys can see is I've basically spec'd out a Model 3. I got long range to minimize the amount of charging you would have to do. And I added nothing else except full self-driving capability for $10,000. That brings the price to $57,000 outright. It estimates about $53,000 with potential savings. So what I used as a calculation on my sheet here is $55,000 for the purchase price of the vehicle. Some other inputs I have here are 6 years of vehicle ownership, which is historically short, but I'm trying to be conservative and see where the numbers fall without being absolutely sure what the math actually looks like. So if I'm wrong on a couple numbers, it still can work out to be something I could break even on. So as far as other inputs for the car goes here, I've got $9,000 as the yearly cost. That's simply a function of the total purchase price divided by 6. And then I've tried to estimate a lot higher than average for insurance, because I'm not entirely sure how much insurance will cost if you're driving your car as a robotaxi. I know that people using their car for Uber or Lyft often have to pay a premium in insurance that's higher than average. So I would imagine that even with Tesla insurance, maybe the robotaxi insurance might not be as cheap as you would like. And again, I'm trying to be conservative with as many of my costs as possible, and also, with how much revenue and everything it'll generate, as you'll see. So if I'm wrong on all fronts, it still has a chance to break even or even profit, even if I miss my estimates. And so finally, that brings me to electricity and repairs, which I admittedly didn't do any research into how much it costs per kilowatt or anything like that, but I thought that $1,500 per year plus this higher insurance cost should be pretty good. As you'll see, that adds up to $5,000 in insurance and electricity repairs, so additional costs per year beyond the cost of the vehicle. And that brings the total cost of ownership per year to $14,000, and the total cost over 6 years to $85,000. I've assumed that the car can travel about 180,000 miles in its lifetime, and I also checked on Statista and saw that the average hourly rate for Uber drivers has been climbing over the last few years that they have data, and in 2019, so 2 years ago, it was just under $20. So given that it jumped from 15 and then 17 to almost 20, I assumed a $20 hourly rate in my assumptions here. You'll also notice that I assume a $1 profit per mile and 15 miles driven in an hour that the car is operating as an Uber or robotaxi. So if you look here in the first column of hours per week, I basically scaffolded out 5 different hypothetical scenarios of how frequently the car is being put to work or more realistically able to find work. I think that if it's a robotaxi and it's a Tesla, depending where in the world you are, if it's legal, a lot of people would be interested in driving in an Uber like that after, maybe some initial skepticism. But I think that for the sheer novelty of being one of the first people to have a autonomous car, it might well be a lot closer to 100 hours a week you could operate it with uptime, not including charging time or time where there's no riders. For reference, there's 160 hours in a week, so that's just under 2/3 of a week's worth of hours. So you'll see here that I've assumed all 6 years of vehicle ownership operate as a robotaxi. I mentioned before that 6 years is a little less than the average vehicle ownership length. It's actually about 8, I believe, but that factors in both leases and people who purchase their car, and also I believe it doesn't count multiple owners over time though. So I thought 6 was a good number to use here because it's kind of right in the middle. And if you're operating the car with a lot of miles per year, that would diminish the length of time that the car lasts. So I thought it was more conservative with this, technically new technology of self-driving vehicles to estimate maybe the car only goes 180,000 miles over its lifetime. Before we jump over to this right column, we can look down below and you notice that the closing share price of Tesla at the time of this recording on March 31st, 2021 is $667.93, and they have a total market cap of just about $641 billion. Another reference point is ARK's recent new forecast, as reported by Barron's and elsewhere, that in the next few years there's a great potential for Tesla to hit basically 450% growth above, I believe it was about 650 a share when Kathy said this. For those who aren't familiar with ARK, highly respectable ETF management company, they have a few ETFs that I'm invested in, and they've been performing really well the last few years, and they put out some really cutting edge research by having a cross-functional investment analyst team. Shout out to ARK, you guys are awesome. Basically what I assume here is that over the duration of the 6 years of vehicle ownership, the 450% ARK forecast comes to fruition. Whether that will or will not happen is another debate entirely, but I will leave it short by saying if Tesla does come out with a fully autonomous robotaxi, like I'm assuming they will above, $2.8 trillion market cap does seem realistic to me, especially given their verticals and horizontals and everything from insurance to solar panels and battery storage and beyond. As Apple can tell you, and Google as well, the majority of their revenues comes from software and incremental sales rather than hardware. And so Tesla has basically not even tapped software yet. They're going to have an app store in their cars, and I could rant about Tesla's potential all day, but I want to keep the focus of this video on the comparison. So we'll assume that Kathy's right again, and Tesla grows 75% a year for the next 6 years. ARK, I believe, estimated 5 years, but we're gonna say 6 years here because it lines up with our vehicle ownership timeline. And as anyone could tell you, particularly someone like me who held Tesla for so long, much of this 450% growth might be at the tail end of the 5 years. And so that's actually a justification against holding the stock rather than buying the car, in my opinion, because owning the car and being paid out yearly as opposed to, buying and holding a stock only to see the returns 5-6 years down the line has time value decay of that money. Now comes the fun part. What we can look at here is that the profit of 20 hours per week, 15 miles an hour with $1 per mile profit would generate yearly revenue of $15,600 after your cut goes to Tesla or whoever is operating the robotaxi service. And over 6 years, that would equate to $1,433 in profit per year. Again, that comes from the total cost of ownership above subtracted from the yearly revenue, and $8,600 over the course of 6 years. That's a 10.3% total return on your investment with a 1.72% annualized return. So that's not great, but again, that's only assuming you're making $15 an hour, which is below what an Uber driver currently makes, and further, that's only operating 20 hours per week, which presumably with a robotaxi of this novelty like we discussed, if it's legal, ideally you would be able to operate at much more than 20 hours per week, up to about 38 or maybe 45 if the car can only go 180 to 200k miles in its lifetime. And if Tesla really did design a 1,000,000-mile car like they are aiming to and aspire to, then 60 or even 100 hours might be more realistic, or not be more realistic, but within reach. And so you'll see here we can move up down the line, and 30 hours, 38 hours, 45 all return less of a return per year than this final column, which with 100 hours per week, $15 and miles per hour running all year would net you $78,000 in yearly revenue with $14,000 in yearly costs. And essentially that would pay for itself in its first year and allow you to buy a second Model 3 if you wanted to scale your investment, and it would also bring you an annualized return of 75%. See here, $63,000 per year would net you $383,000 total from a total cost of ownership of $85,000 with an upfront cost of $55,000 or $60,000 in the first year, and return basically the same thing as the speculative stock would. Now, granted, buying and holding a stock is a lot less work than maintaining a robotaxi presumably will be. Regulation doesn't permit yet operating a robotaxi, so buying a car for $55,000 under the assumption that you will be able to turn it into a robotaxi is probably not a smart idea unless you're extremely confident in Elon Musk's timelines on full self-driving. Disclaimer, Elon Musk has been behind on several of his estimated delivery dates for full self-driving in the past. Eventually, I 100% believe he will have full self-driving, but I am not going to hold my breath and wait for that day. However, if I were in the market for a new car at this time and I wanted the potential for it to appreciate or generate me an income as opposed to just depreciating from the second I purchase it. I believe a Tesla, like the Model 3 or Model Y, would definitely be the car I was considering. But yeah, so I mean, that's really what I've been thinking about, and some interesting numbers I was running. I didn't know when I set out with these numbers that the top line estimate I'd put in was going to equal exactly what ARK estimated. Again, I added a year to ARK's estimated timeline on that horizon for ease of comparison. So technically the rate of return over 5 years for the ARK would be a little bit higher at 90%. But you would have to invest the full amount of money up front, and you would not be able to see any of your realized gains until the end. And you would also have significant tax implications potentially on your final sale, which would bring the total at realized gains closer back to 75%. Yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think. Are you going to buy a Tesla? Would you drive in a robotaxi? Rent a robotaxi if you own a Tesla now and it became legal? Do you think that it's better to buy the stock and hold it? Obviously, I think that it might be a good idea to do both if you can afford to, but yeah, so really just an interesting concept I wanted to talk to you guys about and sort of do the math on together. Please leave me comments and feedback below with what you liked about the video or your own opinion or takeaways. If you liked content like this and want to see more of it, let me know that too. One of the best ways to do that is by hitting the like button below or subscribing. Until next time, guys, it's been a pleasure. Peace.